Welcome to the Women Changing the World podcast, a podcast on a mission to bring you some of the most amazing women I know who are doing incredible things to generally make the world a better place. From corporate sustainability to straight up magic and everything in between, you'll meet the real life humans who are birthing the new. I'm your host, Liz Best, and I'm here to amplify the stories and voices of women who are changing the world. Hello, and welcome to an all-new episode of the Women Changing the World podcast. I am seriously so excited for today's topic. I am so excited for this conversation about enoughness and the moment when we know that we have had enough, and how those two things are showing up for so many of us in our lives and our work today. I am sitting down with Erin Byrne, a social impact and public health leader, consultant, and educator who helps leaders turn sustainability and social impact from well-intentioned initiatives into strategies that actually work inside complex organizations. After more than a decade in senior corporate roles within healthcare and global companies, she founded EB Impact Consulting. In addition to her consulting work, Erin is a distinguished executive in residence at the Rutgers Institute for Corporate Social Innovation and an adjunct professor at Rider University, where she teaches corporate sustainability and responsible business. Erin is so generous in sharing her own journey on and with enoughness and how this has shown up for her at different junctions in her life and career. She talks about what enoughness means to her today as a mother, as a leader, as a person in the world, and she shares what is giving her hope for the future. I found this conversation to be balm for the soul in a year, in a moment where collectively things have felt so challenging. I deeply appreciated how beautifully Erin brought to life how community, connection, and being around other people who get it and can reflect us and our magic back to us and celebrate alongside us can make such a huge difference in feeling like we are enough and feeling like we are doing enough right now. So without further ado, let's get into it. I could not be more excited. I feel like the topic of today's podcast is one that I am, again, just like over the moon to get to talk about it. So please join me in welcoming to the podcast, Erin Byrne. Erin, welcome. Please say hi. I would love for you to introduce yourself to our listeners.
Yeah. Hi, Liz, and congratulations on a whole new episode and season. This is so exciting for you. And thank you so much for inviting me to come along. As you mentioned, my name is Erin Byrne, and I am a former corporate senior leader turned academic and entrepreneur. So I work as an adjunct professor teaching all things related to sustainability, social impact, and business responsibility. And I have my own consulting firm that I started in 2022, where I focus on turning sustainability and social impact efforts into strategies that work inside really complex organizations. And most importantly, I am a mom of 3. So I am also the after-school Uber driver, schedule manager, travel planner, all the things.
All the other hats that you wear.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for that intro. I feel like this conversation has definitely been percolating for me for a very long time. You're someone who I've just known I wanted to have on the podcast again for a very long time. And I know this topic of enoughness is something that you've been thinking about a lot, which we will totally get into. You told us a little bit in your intro, but I'd love to hear a little bit more about like what you are up to these days, both personally and professionally.
I'm actually just prepping to get ready to teach my next graduate course on corporate sustainability. So I'm working a little bit on that. That's coming up next month. But I'm actually in a moment where I'm in between 2 clients right now, which is allowing me to do a little bit skill building and a little breathing into this idea of enoughness that I'm really interested in. So I'm actually taking a writing class to brush up on my writing. It's something I used to do, pushed off a little bit. So I'm looking to get back into that. I'm taking a online course around misinformation and disinformation. And I just think it's something I'm really fascinated in because I think the world is just turning everything online upside down right now. And so it's a topic that I think we all need to have a little bit more literacy on. So that's something I'm doing. And then, I'm able to spend some time to dive into this topic that has just been tapping me on the shoulder for close to 5 years around enoughness. And specifically around where enoughness meets action. So really, how do you define enough for yourself in a way that creates capacity for you to make an impact that matters?
Oh, I love that question. I can't wait to dig into it. I know first, our listeners, one of the things that I hear some of the most positive feedback on for this podcast is people love just hearing your story and how you came to be where you are today. So I would love to hear, as much as you feel like sharing, how did you come to be here? And what about this chapter is inspiring you the most?
I was in the pharmaceutical industry for close to 20 years before I left in 2021. Right out of college, I went in to do pharmaceutical sales with Johnson & Johnson in New York City. After a couple of years with them, jumped over to work at Novo Nordisk in sales, where I ended up staying at the company for more than 15 years. And I knew at the time when I was working in sales that I didn't want to do that forever. So I went back to grad school at NYU and got my master's in public health, concentrating on public nutrition, and started working in-house at the company on some disease awareness efforts, and just was a victim of reorganizations, but also I always had that glass half full perspective. So had the ability to jump around from so many different wonderful roles, and some that I actually created myself, depending on identifying the need there. So I did everything from being a coalition builder in DC, which was something I never thought I would ever do, to doing some business development and business strategy. And then I had the opportunity to work with a colleague of mine who was leading the corporate social responsibility at the time. And we were asked to kind of pair up and bring the company's commitment to triple bottom line back integrated into the organization. So away from just being the philanthropic, maybe building some bikes at the sales meeting or packing backpacks for kids back to school. But how can it be what it was always intended to be from the start, which is the foundation of the company? So I did that for a year. And then my predecessor had left, and I had the opportunity to take over the function of corporate sustainability and social impact there. So while I was leading that, I had the responsibility of all their philanthropic efforts, their corporate social responsibility programming, disaster relief, product donations, as well as the environmental sustainability agenda for the US and employee engagements on all those fronts.
Wow, not a small job.
No, it was a great one. It was, I kind of felt like I was in a boot camp at some moments. Leading that through the pandemic and having 3 small kids at the time at home, I ended up in really bad burnout. And so I ended up quitting in 2021 with no plan. And it was the scariest thing that I think I've ever done.
Wow. And I imagine like there's an element of enough and enoughness there in that moment when you decided that you needed to do something different. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it was something where it was just like, okay, I had enough. I mean, I literally remember standing in the laundry room at like 11 o'clock with my husband. And after a crazy day of both of us leading our respective functions for our companies, and it was like the wild, wild west in the house with the kids. I'm sure many people can relate to that. It just was like, something's got to change, right? It was a moment of like, I had enough. I was very burnt out from the work that I was doing. And I knew my kids just needed somebody at that time. And so we were fortunate to be in a position that I was able to do that.
Oh my goodness. Well, and I'm curious. I feel like that's such a huge transition from what you were doing into like what you're doing now. Yeah, what did that process look like in terms of like kind of reimagining your identity as a professional after 15 years inside a company, which is no small thing?
Yeah, it was definitely that journey of, okay, now what? Quite honestly, I had to go through a little bit of a grieving process. Being with that company for 15 years, I had tons of my life milestones. I mean, I got engaged, I got married, I bought my first house, we got our first dog, I had all my kids, I graduated with my graduate degree, had colleagues that felt like family. And so coming out on the other side, and then having small talk with people at parties or meeting other people on the playground, right? Oh, what do you do? All of a sudden, I felt like, well, who am I if I don't have this title behind my name? So it was part grieving my past life and the company that felt like it was part of my identity, to really this new self-identity of trying to understand who I was at this moment, and quite honestly, not feeling like I was enough to answer that question sometime. I remember literally stumbling and fumbling and, well, I did this and I was that. And, and people are like, thank you. I just kind of was making small talk here.
I just feel that in my soul. My longest tenure somewhere was 6 years. And I definitely had such a grieving process in leaving that I can only imagine with even more time and depth and life. But let's talk a little bit more about enoughness. I feel like perhaps it's helpful now, before we get into like some of your journey with it and what you've been learning and observing, to maybe just define what it even is. So I'm curious, like when you talk about enoughness, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, well, I will tell you, if you look up in the Webster Dictionary, enoughness, it's not there. It's not a correct pronunciation or grammar, right? So it is this newer concept and term that I think has kind of emerged over the past couple of years. And I have been just really getting my tentacles into different publications and trying to understand different perspectives on it and how people are defining it. And I think ultimately it does come centered around the idea of contentment, right? It's really denotes a state of condition of just being enough, or even having enough. I actually read an article yesterday that looked at enoughness in the affluent population in terms of when is enough financially and physically from buying things, right? So there's this idea that it goes with minimalism a little bit. It's often aligned to purpose. Brené Brown actually has done some work in this area through her lens of looking at shame and imposter syndrome, which we know she's well-versed in, obviously, and how that relates to feeling enough. But to really answer your question, for me, it comes down to the idea of contentment, purpose, and confidence.
What a powerful trio. And also, this is the first time I'm learning that it's not in the dictionary, because I feel like, I mean, granted, we live in, different bubbles, sort of like in our world and in like my world. I'm like, oh, I feel like we've been talking about this for years. I've learned so much from you about it.
I know. And maybe it's in a different dictionary. It's not in Webster's.
Good to know. Well, I'm curious, you told us a little bit about like your personal and professional journey, but what has your enoughness journey looked like?
I quit my job and I really started, just feeling all that heaviness of not feeling enough, while at the same time feeling like I had enough, right? Like I had enough of the pandemic, enough of my job, like what happens next? But I did a lot of self-reflection and I tried to like trace it back, right? I had time to like sit with my feelings and do a little work here. And I noticed that for me, it started in high school, specifically when I was taking a writing class in my junior year of high school. And my writing teacher told me that my writing was not good enough and that I had to really think about where I wanted to go to college, because I probably wouldn't write a good enough essay to get me into the schools that I was looking at.
Oh, what a terrible moment.
Yeah. You can think about what that did to 17-year-old me at the time. It just led me into this nosedive into perfectionism and not feeling good enough at so many things. Like, am I good enough to go to college? Am I a good enough friend, student, cheerleader at the time? So it stayed with me for sure. And then I would say professionally, it just started showing up in ways that I always thought was imposter syndrome, right? Like we always talked about that. Think about like the height of, I don't know, 10, 12 years ago, there was Lean In and, all the women in business, ERGs and everything were really talking about imposter syndrome.
Totally. It was all imposter syndrome.
It was everywhere. It was everywhere. And I think back to so many different specific instances where people would say well-intended things to me, but would actually come off like shaming me, that I would reflect on like, oh, geez, am I just not good enough? in whatever it was, right? Like people would say to me, oh, you're so young to be able to be in a role and lead that function like that. And then maybe I'd sit back and be like, was that a compliment or are you shaming me for being at the age I am and having the job that I have? And then I'd go home and drive home and think like, am I not good enough? Right. So it was a lot of reflection, throughout my corporate world. It really started taking hold after I left corporate. Right. And I did think like, gosh, I had enough and I left my job. But this idea of I had enough, it just kept tapping me on the shoulder. Everywhere I looked, it was like, I had enough. Or this idea of people not feeling good enough. So I started thinking like, what's there, right? With people not feeling enough or, saying I had enough and causing them to take some type of action. And I think about it like from a business perspective. So Patagonia, right? I had enough that enough corporations, peers of theirs were not being responsible enough to save the planet. So they changed their business profit structure into a trust that's going to fight climate change. Or individuals that felt like, you know what, I had enough that Congress is not giving my child's orphan disease state enough congressional funding, or there's not enough disease awareness around this. And there was something that made them act on all of those things that really that piqued my interest, right? So it kind of put me down this road of paying attention to all things enoughness.
It's so interesting. Well, I know we talked a lot about, and you even alluded to some of these, like just the different ways enoughness can show up in different aspects of our lives. So I'm curious, and I loved how you defined it, but how do we go about like finding what it means for us in our work, in our lives outside of work, in our activism, in motherhood? How have you, and we can take those one at a time, but how have you thought about it as it applies to different lenses or aspects of our lives?
Yeah, I do think it's a personalized journey for people, right? As I mentioned, I found it really helpful to do a lot of reflection to understand where it showed up for me and where it was coming out. And I can identify it a lot better now. But I think there's self-talk and reminding us. I think there's that we are enough. I think there's strong power in community. And that's, kudos to you, Liz, for garnering that and creating that, because I think there's so much of that happens within the Girls Club Collective. And, something else that happens within your membership that I think is highly important in this perspective is around the idea of celebrating who you are and what your wins are. I think as females, we're so humble and we're very mindful not to brag too much and just sit to the side. And you do a good job, and the members in GCC do a good job of saying like, hey, we need to celebrate our wins, right? And it can be, I'm celebrating that I just applied for a new job, or, it could be as big as I'm celebrating I'm closing out, the sustainability report, or it can be like I'm celebrating that I got through today with a sick kid, whatever that looks like.
Totally. I was gonna say, it's like, yeah, it smells like I finished my coffee while it was still hot.
100%. I actually just started drinking cold coffee because it year round, cold brew all the way.
I love that. Well, yeah, I appreciate. Well, first of all, thank you so much for the kind reflection about GCC. I mean, I know I have found for my own enoughness practices that taking the time to really catalog and reflect on my accomplishments are so helpful for those moments of doubt and like wonder of like, do I know what I'm doing? Yeah, which is so real.
Yeah.
Also, I'm curious because I hear you saying too that like reflection has been a big part of this for you. And I'm curious, are there any particular like questions, or you mentioned like kind of going back to the source of like, where did this maybe unhelpful thought or idea start? I'm curious if there are other questions or reflections that you found especially useful.
Yeah, I think I've been able to identify that moment in my high school writing class as a sticking point for me for years, for better or worse. And so I think it's a matter of, just being very hyper aware to like, honestly, like, what am I feeling right now? Like, why did I want to blabble, who I am and my big history at the random guy on the playground when he just asked what I did? And what is that saying to me? And same thing for me. Like, I didn't want to say that I was just a stay-at-home mom. To me, that wasn't what I wanted fully, although I wanted some time with my kids. And I had to sit with that too and kind of wrestle with that and be like, why don't I want this? Why am I not necessarily embarrassed to say that, but why is that not naturally coming out of my mouth? I don't know. I don't have the magic bullet here, but it's really just trying to figure out, how do you tune into yourself to feel what you're feeling? And then identify why. I did have a therapist one time start and say, why are you feeling this way? And I would answer, and they would just be like a series of whys after that, to really try to get deeper on that.
Oh my goodness, it's so funny. You're in my brain. I was going to say, I feel like I've had a therapist where like I worked with her for years on just like figuring out how to feel my feelings, because I like just was so used to not feeling them in my body. And it's funny. I don't know if you've heard of like the 5 whys exercise of like, to figure out why something's important. And so as you were saying that, it's something that I was thinking about last night for a totally different reason. I was like, I really need to 5 whys this.
And that's probably exactly what it was. And I didn't have the term for it, but I try to do it with my kids now, and they just get really mad at me.
Oh, that's cute. Like, stop asking why, Mom.
Yeah.
Well, that was something that, and I know that we didn't talk about this ahead of time, so I hope it's okay that I'm asking, but I'm curious, like enoughness and motherhood, I feel like there's so much there. Like, how has that been showing up for you, like in being with your 3 kids and in teaching them about life and the world?
Yeah. I mean, I'm constantly feeling like I'm failing every day. I say that half jokingly, but it's the hardest job that we have, right? And the last thing you want to do, you just desperately want to protect these little people, and at the same time, make sure that you're guiding them to be the best versions of themselves and the best versions of people that can go out and make a positive impact in the world. We second guess everything, right? We second guess from the moment that baby arrives, like, am I doing everything right? Right. And it's, my kids now I've got one in high school, one in middle school, and one in elementary school. And I've gotten so much better on so much. And I think I'm still working on so much, right? The challenges just evolve and change. And, I think that's just a constant work for me is, am I showing up enough and in the right way for where they are in their phases right now?
Totally. It makes me think of the America Ferrera speech in the Barbie movie of like,
oh, yes,
just the impossibility of all the things at the same time.
Oh, yes. I mean, I'm sure like every other woman watching that, like in Mother, right? Just like you watch that and you're like, oh my God, she's speaking to me. That's exactly how I feel. But we have to be not so hard on ourselves. And this is like a constant internal discussion I have with myself, right? Like dinner didn't go as planned. The healthy meal didn't get put on the table. Chicken nuggets it is. Everyone's going to be okay.
Totally.
Hi, it's Liz, and I am popping in to interrupt this episode with a quick PSA. If you are craving more conversations like this one and more opportunities to learn from and build reciprocal relationships with leaders like Erin, I would love for you to join us in the Girls Club Collective community. It's magic. The best way to plug in is to sign up for our next free community power hour, and you can find all the details on our website, girlsclubcollective.co. I would absolutely love to see and meet you there. And without further ado, back to the episode.
Well, and I'm curious because I know that, when we last spoke, we talked a little bit too about like how we can apply this lens of enoughness to the moment that we're in. Like we're recording this in February of 2026. It's an impossible time to be a human in the world, a human in the United States, and someone who cares about impact. Like I could go on and on. It's just a really tough time. And I'm curious to know more about how you are thinking about enoughness as it relates to how we're showing up for ourselves and for each other right now.
Yeah, the world is a very, very heavy place right now. And admittedly, I watch too much news. I go down the social media rabbit hole way often than I should. What gives me hope is being in community with like-minded people, but also just recognizing the good that's out there. The amount of people that are really trying to make a positive difference in the world and, take down the haters. I mean, it's hard, right? But that's what keeps me going. There is such a bright future. there's so many passionate students that I teach that are going to change the world. The way that they think, that the way they approach things is vastly different than the way I was thinking when I was in my junior and senior year of college or in graduate school. And that's the stuff that gives me hope.
Totally.
A lot of people look at it, so just say like, right, I had enough. I had enough of sitting back and, being a passerby of everything that's going on. And I think there's a lot of people that just say like, I don't know what to do. And then there's plenty of people that just say, I had enough and, I'm going to do something. And there's so many, I think there's a vast array of actions that one can take to make the world a better place.
Definitely. I feel like the thing, and I feel like I've been saying this on repeat lately, but the thing that I just think about is like, small is all. Like, how are we being just intentional about what the small things that we can do are, because they do add up. And I think there's like so much of this idea of like, I know for so many of us who think at a systems level, it can like feel so frustrating to not be able to just like remake capitalism, reimagine like our political system. But like, I don't know, when we just break it down into like, what's the thing I can do right now, today, to feel like I'm like doing something to move the ball.
Absolutely. And sometimes it can be like, I smiled at somebody today, or I held the door for somebody today, or, I had a really good conversation with my kid today about what's happening, to writing your congressional member and getting much more, active in whatever that looks like. And I think we do. I love that small is all, because it's the small things that do keep us going. And to your point, because it feels so heavy, a lot of us who are working in the social impact and the sustainability world can feel like we aren't doing enough. And what else can we do? We don't feel like it's making enough of an impact. So it feels like the work to do is just endless. And then you feel like you're never doing enough, which is not the right cycle to go in.
Totally. And yeah, so human. But yeah, actually picking up on that. I mean, I've been so lucky to get to like work with you one-on-one and have you in the Girls Club Collective community. And it's been so fun to bring your expertise on this topic to life with other women who are change agents, who are working in impact. And I know like you got to host an in-person roundtable on this topic in New York last fall. I'm curious, when you do talk to like other women in our space, in our world, what comes up most frequently about enoughness, or like what are some of the threads that you've been noticing lately?
Yeah, thank you for that. And that New York City conversation was just magic. What I reflect a lot on is that this idea resonates with people, right? Whether I'm having a street conversation, a water cooler conversation with somebody, or a very intentional, curated discussion with people, it does resonate on both sides, right? People are like, especially women, feel like I'm not doing enough. I'm not enough. And we have to move past that. And this is where I'm very interested in is, what is it that has that baseline level of enoughness that makes you feel confident enough to go forward to make that impact of whatever it's going to be?
Yeah, it's so wild. It's wild how many of us are like having the same feelings and having the same conversations. And I love that question that you're holding. I'm curious, is there anything that you might want to preview about what like might be coming up for you and this topic next?
Yeah, well, look, I'm just dipping my toe in the water of trying to figure out how to take this further, right? But I am planning another in-person conversation, one actually in Austin, Texas in April. And I think we're looking to do another one in New York City. So that's very exciting. And I'm opening an area on my webpage called I Had Enough.
Oh my gosh, this is new news to me. That's awesome.
Still a little TBD on what will go there. But look, I'm just really fascinated by stories, right? And so how can I help create, listen, understand the stories of people who either said I had enough or they didn't feel enough and they found greatness and impact along the way. And so, like I said, I don't have a real clear road path for where I'm going to take this, but I'm so passionate about it that I'm hoping to inch it along this year.
I love it. Well, like this idea would not keep tapping you on the shoulder if there wasn't something there. So I'm so excited to see what comes to life this year.
Thank you. Yeah, the universe just keeps showing up in like the most random ways.
Oh my gosh, is there like a fun random way that you want to share with us?
Yeah, one of my favorites actually is when I was scrolling Instagram, I think it was last year, there was a conversation with Lenny Kravitz, and he talked about how he didn't feel enough. And, they said, Lenny, how could you possibly feel like you're not good enough? And he just talked about that there's at the ripe age of, 60, 61, still feels like there's the 16-year-old inside of him worrying that his music's going to be good enough for people. And I was just like, man, if Lenny Kravitz is feeling that, and, it's a lot of us.
Absolutely. It can be so refreshing to be like, wow, we are so not alone. Well, I know that you've, again, done so much research and reading on this topic. So I'm curious for anyone who's listening who would love like a deeper dive or an article or a podcast or, just a different place or way to think more about this as it relates to their own life. Do you have any recommendations for places to start?
Yes. And that just gave me a great idea of what I can put on that tab on my website is definitely some resources. I will say, I have some books here. One of Brene Brown's older books was something that really kind of shed some light into it for me. I thought it was just me, but it isn't. Making the journey from what will people think to I am enough, I think was really transformational for me, and understanding that reflective journey that I went on, and understanding like some of those special moments that spoke to me and making me feel that. I love On Our Best Behavior, The 7 Deadly Sins and the Price Women Pay to Be Good.
Oh, I love that book so much.
Yeah, as a woman, it's very powerful. And one that I just picked up is How to Be Enough by a therapist, actually, Ellen Hendrickson. So I haven't gotten too far into that yet, but that's another great one.
Oh my gosh, amazing. Well, we'll make sure to link all of these in the show notes because I feel like I've got some new books that I'm putting on my reading list. I want to shift gears a little bit before we wrap up our conversation and just ask some fun, get to know you questions in this moment. A big focus for me, I think, in the conversations that I want to have this year is around how we as humans and leaders are meeting this moment. And obviously you're someone who's making an impact in such an inspiring way to me. What is helping you keep going right now?
Really good question, because I think it's so easy to just sit in despair after watching the news. For me, the option of not doing anything is what keeps me going. I just can't sit around and just, watch some of the things that I deeply care about around our country and sustainability and public health and, just to scratch the surface. I feel like I have to do something. And so that's what keeps me going. Also, no matter, what political side you are, you want to great future for your children and the next generation. And that keeps me going. And like I mentioned, I'm always really energized and become so hopeful after I teach a course, because these are the next leaders and, next generation of leaders that is going to make a positive impact in the world. That's hugely refreshing.
I bet. I feel like everyone who's interacting with the younger generation on a regular basis has so much fresh perspective and excited perspective on the future coming out of those interactions in a way that makes me excited for what's coming.
Years ago, when I just had my son, who was my oldest, there was something going on in the world, and I was talking to a colleague of mine, and I was like, man, this sucks, right? And she was talking about how her father watches the news all day long. And I was like, oh, I watch it for a half hour at night. It just depresses me. And I said, I just worry, for my kids. And she said, yeah, but maybe they're going to be the ones that's going to make the change. And that really stuck with me. They're the future.
Totally. And I will share, I had a pretty surreal experience of getting to read, hope she wouldn't mind me sharing this, but getting to read my mom's journals from when my sister and I were little.
Oh, wow.
And she was writing, I don't remember exactly what current events were happening, but she wrote, and this is the part that haunts me, it's just have things always been this bad? Things just seem so bad. This is late 80s, early 90s, and relatively speaking, it's wow, is this just part of our human experience is also feeling this way, and then that's what's going to get us to the I've had enough moment of collectively doing something about it.
Yeah, that's powerful.
I was like, what?
You're like, that was nothing.
Well, I'm curious, what advice do you wish you could give your younger self? And this could be the self from your high school writing class or any different Erin along the way.
It's a good question. I would probably say that it's all going to be okay. It's all going to work out. I've always been a worry person that worries way too much, and I still do. So it's the advice that I give my younger self, but it's the advice that I try to tell myself too.
I love that. And your answer for this may be the same or similar, but I'm curious, is there like a quote or reminder? Like I often just have Post-its all over my office. Is there anything that's inspiring you right now?
Well, when I was little, my dad had a cutout from a newspaper clip on our refrigerator in our house, and it said, "Your attitude predicts your altitude in life." And that is something that I loved and appreciated more as I got older, and I think so true. So that is absolutely something. But I'd be remiss to share that I have a calendar of quotes every day.
Of course you do.
And so I just happened to peek at tomorrow's, and it's a quote by Abraham Lincoln that says, "The best way to predict your future is to create it." And so I thought that was pretty relevant to what we're talking about.
Oh, totally. I love that. Well, because this is the Women Changing the World podcast, I have to ask, if you could just pick one thing in the world that you would most want to change, what is the thing that you would pick?
Would I be too cliche if I said everyone felt enough? Honestly, I feel like people felt enough in their own skin. Maybe there would be more kindness and less hatred, and maybe there'd be more change makers.
I love that. I don't think it's cliche. I think it's on brand.
That's a good way to put it.
But how do we get there, Erin?
It's a journey. We're all on the journey together.
Totally. Well, I, for one, am so grateful that you are holding the torch on this journey for us to follow you. I think, again, this topic feels so important right now. And I feel like it touches so many different dimensions of life and work and activism and how we're showing up right now. And so thank you for making time to share your expertise with us and resources.
Thank you for having me.
And for people like me, and what's the best way for people who are listening who are like, I need more Erin in my life stat? Where's the best place for people to find you, follow you, and stay in touch and check out your new I've Had Enough website? Give us all the deets.
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn and very active on LinkedIn. So that's probably one of the best places. But my website, which is ebimpactconsulting.com, and that's where I'll have a tab of I Had Enough.
I love it. Well, thank you again so much, Erin. This has been so much fun. And I'm so excited to get to continue cheering you on as you go on this journey. I feel like there's so much more to come.
Yes. I don't know what it is, but I'm excited for it.
Well, I also really want to celebrate you before we wrap up, because I feel like it takes so much courage to be witnessed in progress and process. And I think that's something that I find so inspiring about you and about some of the other people in our community is, it takes boldness to say I don't have the cute, perfect answer, and I'm going to show up and ask questions and be present and find out. So thank you too for not waiting until you had, here's the book to share with us.
Yeah. Well, I mean, thank you for saying that, because I think you probably more than anyone knows that, my perfectionism was definitely present for much of my entrepreneurial journey. And it's been hard to embrace that concept of go messy, right? It goes against everything that I've practiced and been taught, growing up and being in the professional world. And it's hard to go against the grain sometimes, but I think, here I am with this itching on me for 4.5 years. And it's at some point you just got to go. You just got to go messy, and you just got to figure it out. And, so thank you for being with me on the journey.
Absolutely. It's I read, someone framed it once as actually, I think, a past podcast guest as learning in public. And I'm oh gosh, it's so uncomfortable.
Yeah, for sure.
It's also so good.
It is. Appreciate being in like-minded community with you. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you so much, Erin. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the Women Changing the World podcast. Please rate and review the podcast wherever you're currently listening to it, and don't forget to subscribe for future episodes. You can find me on Instagram at liz.best, that's lis.best, and you can find Girls Club Collective at girls_club_collective. You can also find us on LinkedIn by searching for Liz Best, that's my name, LASBEST, and Girls Club Collective. Join our mail list by visiting the Girls Club Collective homepage and scrolling down to the bottom. You'll be in the loop on upcoming events, retreats, and opportunities to make magic with us, and you'll also receive a monthly love note from my heart to your inbox. I am so excited to keep in touch.